Greg Wyshynski and Art O'Cal with you. Welcome to a special edition of The Drop presented by Discover. Alex Ovechkin, immortality, history, as he and Wayne Gretzky forever intertwined among the highest goal scorers in NHL history. But we thought while we are in this historic era, why don't we expand on that word era and go on a little bit of an era's tour in the career of Alex Ovechkin?
If you do something, you have to be the best all the time. So if you don't want to be the best, just stop doing it.
When you feel the taste,
the march for 895 is on.
you want more and more.
We're past the point of if. We all know it's a matter of time.
Ovechkin takes another step toward Gretzky.
You look at the milestones, but I'm not done yet.
He's the Great Eight, and there are 8 distinct eras to Alex Ovechkin's NHL career. I've had the pleasure of covering it since he was a rookie. I was in DC. I was in the Caps press box watching rather small crowds at that point, watching Ovechkin's rookie season. And obviously from there, a legend was born and a legend was forged, and history will be made.
Yes, so we have 8 eras in Alex Ovechkin's career. Start us off pretty straightforward, where we would start at the very beginning.
Yeah, the rookie ROCKSTAR era is our first Alex Ovechkin era on the Eras Tour. You got to remember where the Caps were before they drafted Ovechkin, okay? This was their worst season in 26 years. They traded away Jaromir Jagr, Peter Bondra, Robert Lang, Sergei Gonchar, Michael Nylander, Anson Carter, and Mike Greer in a 6-week span to make sure they were as bad as possible. And they didn't even have the best lottery odds. In fact, Arda, the team with the best lottery odds when Alex Ovechkin went first overall, the Pittsburgh Penguins. In fact, the Capitals had the 3rd best odds to try to win that lottery. So they draft first overall in 2004. The Penguins end up with Evgeny Malkin, no small consolation prize there. The 2004 lockout happens. We all have to wait for Ovechkin's first rookie season in 2005, 2006. And again, he's joining a Capitals team where like 3 of the top 5 scorers are Jeff Halpern, Brian Wilsey, and Chris Clark. Okay, this is not the fully formed Capitals team quite yet. The biggest thing about this era, Arda, the ROCKSTAR rookie era, is, of course, the Sidney Crosby of it all. Crosby makes his debut the same season as Alex Ovechkin, 2005-06. Ovechkin did not have the buzz of Sidney Crosby. Let's put that out there to be clear. Sidney Crosby was the Canadian Golden Boy, the phenom, the one that they changed the draft rules for. The Penguins obviously win that lottery. And so he comes into the season basically with his hands on the Rookie of the Year trophy already. And then Alex Ovechkin kind of snatches it away. He was the Rookie of the Month in October. He put out his calling card. And from there on in, he had the better rookie season than Sidney Crosby. In fact, he won the Calder Trophy with 124 first-place votes to Crosby's 4. And this rookie season, Arda, not only begins the Alex Ovechkin goal-scoring train, but it also creates the NHL's version of Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird that will help bring the league back to prominence after the canceled season.
Yeah, I think we have to put a lot of weight on how important that was, the fact that you had both superstars on different teams. And of course, we'll get to their trials and tribulations, particularly in the postseason a little bit later on. But you made a really good point there. Like, can you imagine if the terrific 3 in Pittsburgh was Ovechkin, Crosby, and Letang? Like, the idea of Ovechkin and Crosby playing on the same team. I mean, we've seen the memes at this trade deadline of Sidney Crosby in a Capitals uniform. Like, can you imagine if that happened all along?
I think it's a great what if, because quite frankly, you know, on top of everything that Alex Ovechkin has done during his career statistically and the awards and the cup and the whole thing, I mean, his value to the Capitals in those early years and bringing that franchise back from the abyss through his sheer star power. I mean, I love Evgeny Malkin. Evgeny Malkin's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the best 100 players in NHL history, but he does not have the same rock star gravitas that Ovechkin has that really sparked the revival of the Capitals franchise. So they would have gotten Malkin, who's great, but they wouldn't have gotten the guy that they could build the franchise around and who they almost adopted the personality of as a team.
So in the Rockstar rookie era, which we are defining from 2004 to 2006, Ovechkin scored 52 goals in this era. Also had his personal career record of most shorthanded goals with 3. That was in 05-06. He has 5, and the last one was in the 21-22 season. So now we're getting into the peak Ovechkin years that we are labeling as
the Caps Young Guns era, 2006 to 2009. This is where the Rock the Red Capitals were born. This was the slogan that they had in Washington, D.C. Fans started showing up to the arenas in droves, all wearing red. The rebranding of the Capitals occurs here. This is when Nick Backstrom, a huge important figure in Ovechkin's rise as the goal-scoring leader in the NHL, Mike Green, Alexander Semin, Brooks Lake, eventually John Carlson and Carl Alsner on defense. This is where they all start to show up and really help the Capitals turn the corner from a shell of a team with Alex Ovechkin as the centerpiece to a fully formed team around Alex Ovechkin. Ask Connor Bedard what that's like.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure he's very curious what that's like. More importantly, they also change coaches in this era and bring in Bruce Boudreau from the Hershey Bears. He takes over the bench in 2007. He creates an offensive first system that plays right into Ovechkin's hands. And Ovi's already putting up goals at this point, but his goal scoring really explodes. They make the playoffs for the first time in 2008. They lose in 7 games to the Flyers. He wins his first playoff series in 2009 over the Rangers and sets up the first ever Crosby versus Ovechkin meeting in the playoffs. This era, Arda, will be forever remembered for May 4th. May the 4th be with you, sir. 2009, the double hat trick playoff game, game 2 of their series between Crosby and Ovechkin, where famously Sidney Crosby complained after the game that it was taking too long for the Capitals arena workers to clear the hats from the ice. That's another story. Ovechkin wins back-to-back Hearts 2008, 2009. In 2008, Ovechkin signs a 13-year, $124 million contract. This is really when things start cooking for him and the Capitals.
Yeah, we talked about the importance of the rivalry between Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby, right? Like Hulk Hogan needs a Roddy Piper, John Cena needs a Cody Rhodes, right? Like that, the baby face and the heel are just two strong adversaries. That hat trick game cemented it. For all the hype, for all the great play between both players, that was the moment where people said, wow, this is going to be special for so many years. And that is, it, like you said, a pinnacle moment in the era, the chapter of Crosby versus Ovechkin. Now, as you said, Ovechkin, highest goal scoring volume in this era, the Young Guns, the Caps Young Guns era from 06 to 09. 167 goals scored in this era, his 2 highest goal scoring seasons, 65 in 07-08, 56 in 08-09. His highest point season was 07-08 with 112. Now, he also had the most ice time per game in this era. Back to back, 23 minutes and 6 seconds, 21:48 and 23 minutes. This was all in consecutive seasons. So, yeah, he was humming during this time.
Yeah. He wins the back-to-back Hart trophies as league MVP. And as you mentioned, his ability to basically have his tank on full in the third period of games and also stay in the lineup is really what cemented the Russian machine never breaks mantra that would follow Ovechkin all the way through his career to the point where, like, broken legs keep him out for like a minute and he just comes back and starts playing.
Or less, 45 seconds. But of course, listen, every good story has some point of adversity, which brings us to 2009.
Yeah, we're in real Joseph Campbell hero's journey here. You know, we have to have some adversity. We have to have some obstacles over which Alex Ovechkin must overcome. This is the crisis era. This is the crisis era. Now, there are some good things here for Ovechkin. He became the captain of the Capitals, taking the C from Chris Clark's chest in 2009-10. The Capitals win the President's Trophy for the first time in franchise history in that season. They're rocking and rolling. They're thinking about winning the Cup for the first time as a franchise. They meet the lowest seed in the playoffs, are the Montreal Canadiens. And here comes Yaroslav Halak. Here come the Canadiens. They rally from a 3-1 series deficit and upset the Capitals in 7 games. Ovechkin has 1 goal in the last 3 losses, takes some criticism for it. But more than anything, Arda, this began a crisis of conscience around this Capitals team. We can run and gun, we can score goals, we're tons of fun, we're making music videos that they're showing on the Jumbotron. I still remember going to the taping of the thing and seeing like Mike Green on the drums. But can they win in the playoffs? That becomes the question. Is that style of play transfer? In 2010-11, the Capitals beat the Rangers in the first round, but then are swept by the Lightning. And now we're wondering, can Ovechkin even get over the hump? Bruce Boudreau is fired 22 games into the 2011-12 season. Former Capital star Dale Hunter, you remember him? Guy who earned a massive suspension for hitting somebody as they're celebrating a goal. He takes over as head coach after being a success on the junior hockey circuit. He has the Capitals play a defensive style, telling Ovechkin to block more shots. Ovechkin has 65 points under Hunter, a career low. The Capitals lose in the second round in 7 to the Rangers. Hunter is not brought back. Adam Oates is hired. The Capitals lose in the first round of the Rangers, then fail to make the playoffs in 2013-14. The first time Ovi has missed since very early in his career. His perceived defensive deficiencies are being widely criticized now, Arda, as a reason the Capitals can't get over the hump. He addresses it by saying, hey, I scored a bunch of goals. You guys said block more shots. I blocked more shots. Now you want me to score a bunch of goals. It kind of sucks to have that minus, but it's not only one player out there, he said famously. And so now we get the Alex Ovechkin is selfish thing going on too. The Hockey News actually writes during the crisis era, Arda, that, quote, Alex Ovechkin to the KHL in Russia would be a blessing in disguise for the Capitals. Writer Adam Frodo wrote, after 9 NHL seasons, Ovechkin has failed to live up to expectations, if not as an individual, then certainly as the driver of a team. He wins the Hart in 2013. It's his last regular season MVP award to this date. It is not a fun time for Alex Ovechkin during the crisis era.
And it's wild to look at that in retrospect. After everything that has happened, it's crazy to think that this was a real thing, that people were thinking, this guy's not a playoff performer. He could quite possibly be a liability to this team, and he might be better off away from the team. It's just unbelievable to think. He had 203 goals in this era, 7 fewer than Steven Stamkos in this time. So this is 2009 to 2014. Although we were talking about plus minus, his best plus minus was a plus 45 in 09, 2010. Now, we should also give some love to our colleague John Buccigross, because in 2010, that's when he began to say and suggest that Ovechkin, with his trajectory, could actually break Wayne Gretzky's career goal-scoring record. This will take a lot of health, a lot of hockey love, and a lot of luck, but it's not far-fetched. Boy, it is not far-fetched at all.
It's not. And there's some like debate as to who said it first. For me, for you, I think for a lot of people, the first place I ever saw it suggested that Ovechkin could catch Gretzky was from the fingers of John Buccigross on ESPN.com. So I think he was first with it, and he turned out to be pretty correct about it as well.
Absolutely. So this era, which was the crisis era, bleeds very nicely in our adversity theme to our next era, because at this point, people are screaming and yelling and pleading for Alex Ovechkin to finish his story, finish the Caps story. But there's more sadness to come in the DC area, isn't there, Wish?
There is. So Barry Trotz is hired as head coach, and that's great. I mean, Barry Trotz obviously helps to turn this Capitals team into an eventual champion. So that's a very big moment in this championship frustration era that stretches from 2014 to 2017. You have players like Evgeny Kuznetsov and Braden Holtby that are joining the remaining young guns on the roster. The Capitals return to the playoffs. They lose in the second round in 7 games to the New York Rangers. You know, as much as we focus, Arda, on the Crosby versus Ovechkin rivalry, there is something to be said for how Henrik Lundqvist would frequently frustrate the Capitals in the playoffs with all these series against the Rangers. The following season, they lose in the second round again to Sidney Crosby and the Penguins. In 2016-17, they lose in the second round again to, Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins, this time in 7 games. We should note, by the way, that one of the hallmarks of this Ovechkin-Crosby rivalry, one, animosity. They did not like each other for many, many years. Two, the fact that Crosby won everything on a team level, whether it was the Penguins, whether it was Team Canada, while Ovechkin could not win anything on the team level. And it should be said that all of the Stanley Cup wins that Sidney Crosby had came in seasons in which he beat Ovechkin's team on the way to the Cup. Would Ovechkin ever play for a championship or beat the Penguins? Those are the questions people were asking in the championship frustration era.
Of course, that era ended in 2017. Ovechkin scored 136 goals in this era. He had the most power play goals in one season in his career, 25 in 2014-15. Also had the most hits in one season, 259 in the 14-15 season, which is great because he's also about 300 hits away from the all-time record.
Wow.
Which is owned by Cal Clutterbuck, 4,029. Ovi has about 3,700 and counting. So, It's just crazy. But, what I'm trying to say here is it's crazy that Alex Ovechkin is in this rarefied air of goal scoring in NHL history, cementing himself as the greatest goal scorer in NHL history, right? But he's also a physical player that is knocking on the door for most hits in NHL history. It's just crazy.
Yeah, the fact that he's been able to get that close to the record without the Nassau Coliseum ×5 multiplier that Cal Clutterbuck had during his career in box scores, pretty impressive. But that's the other thing too. Like when we talk about Ovechkin's legacy, there are facets of his game beyond the goal scoring that probably deserve more love. He is a pretty good playmaker. Like he doesn't get enough credit for his passing, his physicality. He was one of the more feared hitters in this league for a very long time. There's a certain completeness to his game that probably gets overlooked because we just think of him as the guy in the circle, firing slap shots past goalies on the power play. And that's not necessarily fair. But I will also mention his legacy to say that at this point in his career, heading into 2017-18, there is a conversation about Alex Ovechkin that we are now hearing about players like Connor McDavid. What is their legacy if they don't raise the cup? And it became kind of a thing where we could see Ovechkin was going to finish with one of the highest goal totals in the history of the league. He was probably going to be a Hall of Famer. When that happened, there would have to be a conversation of he did this, he did that, he did this, he did that, but he never got his name on the cup. And it became kind of troublesome for a lot of Ovechkin fans leading into the next era where, luckily, the situation was rectified.
He avoids the Charles Barkley syndrome. He finally finishes the story in 2017-2018, the Stanley Cup era.
The Stanley Cup era. Now, by now, he's got some more friends on the roster. He's got Tom Wilson, on his line, being the old intimidating guy that Tom Wilson can be. He can also play a little hockey, too. TJ Oshie, an absolute important cog in the machine that would be a Capitals champion. Backstrom is really the only member of the young guns on this roster left. John Carlson's there too. But Semon's gone, Green's gone. All these players that Ovi came up with are no longer there, but Ovi keeps going. Finally, it happens in the playoffs, Arda. The Capitals defeat Sidney Crosby and the Penguins in the second round in 6 games. It puts Ovechkin in a championship round in the playoffs for the first time in his career. He has 7 points in the series. It is a cathartic moment for the Capitals. And one of those moments where you feel like, okay, they have finally exercised the demon that is the Penguins in the playoffs. The sky's the limit. They defeat Tampa in the conference final, winning games 6 and 7 with back-to-back shutouts. Defense wins championships, Arda. Dale Hunter smiles someplace as he sees the Capitals go back-to-back shutouts to win that series. Ovechkin and the Caps face the expansion Golden Knights from Vegas in the Stanley Cup final, a team that their former boss, George McPhee, the man who drafted Alex Ovechkin, assembled as their general manager. After losing game 1, the Capitals win 4 straight. They win the first Stanley Cup in team history. Ovechkin ends the postseason with 15 goals in 24 games and wins the Conn Smythe. So not only, Arda, is his name on the Stanley Cup, but he is the most valuable reason why the Capitals win that Stanley Cup.
And that exercises all of the demons, all the narratives leading into this season, completely gone. He won the Cup. He was a big reason why. He was the MVP of the playoffs. He did it. And that cemented his legacy. As if it wasn't already cemented, the one knock against him was completely removed. He had his Stanley Cup. He found his fountain. All was right in the world. So
A
And by the way,
celebration for the ages. Yeah, I mean that's
correct.
the other beautiful symmetry to this too, is the idea that they win the cup and the guy whose joie de vivre, his rock star attitude, revitalized the Capitals franchise in his first few years in the league, ends up leading what was, in my opinion, still the most epic cup celebration that I think we've seen in the last 20 years.
And by the way, it started in Vegas, right? Because they won the cup on the road.
Yeah.
And so it already off to a flying start,
Yeah.
celebrating a Stanley Cup win in Vegas. Unbelievable. He had 49 goals in this era. That was the one season. So now he has this incredible career. He exercises the Penguins demon. He wins the Stanley Cup. Now we're moving on to essentially sort of a new chapter for Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah. The elder statesman era from 2018 to 2023. Ovechkin goes gray. He's now got the cup. He's got the goals. He's well respected. The Capitals obviously are in a bit of a decline right now. He won the big one, but the team is not the same. They followed their Stanley Cup win by not escaping the first round of the playoffs over the next 4 seasons. They hired Todd Reirden after a contract dispute with Barry Trotz. He moves on to the Islanders. Reirden was an assistant for the Penguins. He didn't really work out as head coach. They hire Peter Laviolette, now the head coach of the Rangers. They can't get out of the first round. They missed the playoffs entirely in 2022-23. For Ovi, though, he led the NHL in goals in 2018-19 and 2019-20. In total, he won the Rocket Richard Trophy for leading the league in goals in 7 of 8 seasons from 2012 to 2020. Just an incredible run for Ovi. One of the beautiful things about becoming the elder statesman of this league is that you find common ground with other elder statesmen. And one of the beautiful things about this era for Ovi, him and Crosby become buds. Like they lay down their weapons. Maybe it's because Alex finally gets a Stanley Cup, so he feels a little bit more on even ground with Crosby as 2 championship players. But they get along at the All-Star game. Famously, they sit there like Statler and Waldorf from the Muppet Show on the boards as all the young kids are doing the skills competition. They're joking around. It's a beautiful thing to see the 2 most iconic players from an entire generation who didn't always like each other finally kind of find peace later in their careers. And that's what happens in this era. But something else happens too, and we should probably mention this, Arda. Ovi's reputation takes a hit during this era because he is an ardent supporter of Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, and Russia invades Ukraine. Now, not just a supporter, a campaigner, a guy who was leading Putin team, part of an election campaign apparatus for Vladimir Putin. He's got Putin in his social media avatars with him, and he had to answer for this support of the Russian president after the invasion of Ukraine, and he did so by claiming he just wanted peace. He said, quote, "Please, no more war. It doesn't matter who is in the war, Russia, Ukraine, different countries. We have to live in peace." This upset a lot of people who found this was Ovechkin kind of running away from his past support of the president. But he addressed it, and I think that there is an undercurrent to his record chase for Gretzky that is undeniable. That a lot of people have reframed Ovechkin in a negative light because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Ovechkin's support of Putin. One more thing to say about this era is that his monstrous contract came up. And so he had to make a decision whether or not he wanted to try to chase the Gretzky record with the Capitals, go someplace else. He re-signed with the Capitals out of loyalty, out of respect for the owner, Ted Leonsis, who we should mention was a huge driving force in all of the success the Capitals had during these eras, but also under the promise that they would make a competitive team around him as he played out the string in the NHL, which is a very important promise they made and one that they ended up keeping.
Ovechkin scores 215 goals in this era, which is 16 fewer than Leon Draisaitl. Slowing down a little by his standards anyway, but still closing in on Gretzky's record, which brings us to the next era.
This is the Catching Gretzky era, 2024 to right this moment as you're watching this this deep dive on Alex Ovechkin. Young Spencer Carberry looks like Lex Luthor, but he's a great hockey coach, takes over the Capitals, returns them to playoff contention. They smartly add players around Ovechkin. Now, not only from the great prospect pipeline the Capitals have always had between the parent club and Hershey down in the AHL, where they allow young players to kind of percolate and get better over time, but they take some gambles and buy low on some players. Dylan Strome, Pierre-Luc Dubois, who at that point was seen as a toxic asset with the LA Kings. Jacob Chikrin, young players like Connor McMichael come up. All of them surround Ovechkin. They make the playoffs as a wild card in Carberry's first season, and then they go and challenge for the President's Trophy in his second season. You look at Crosby and the Penguins and how they've floundered around trying to find a way to contend again. And then Ovechkin's team surrounds him with talent and gets exponentially better and, are a cup contender at a time when nobody thought they'd be a cup contender with Ovechkin at his age. But more importantly, of course, Ovechkin continues the Gretzky chase, and people were questioning how much he had left in the tank in that chase. If you remember their first round loss to the Rangers in 2024, there was a lot of talk about, is he cooked? He looked terrible in that series. He comes back at the beginning of 24-25 and has the best goal scoring start of his career, Arda.
Yeah.
He is rocking and rolling. He breaks his leg during this season. He comes back from it and starts scoring again. Really a remarkable run in this season in particular to put him in position to break Gretzky's record.
Yeah, at this age, he has the highest shooting percentage of any season in his career, north of 17%. All the players that you said, particularly Dylan Strome, it's been a boon to him particularly, and it's paying off dividends. Maybe it's the motivation of being so close to Gretzky's record. Maybe it's the fact that it's a competitive team. By the way, the first team to clinch a playoff spot this season. I don't think anyone saw that coming before the season started. But Ovechkin looks highly motivated. Like, you can tell he just has the hunger in him. You see it on the ice. He's begging for the puck, wanting to score. And it's amazing to see because we all want to see the moments, history made, and this brings us to our 8th era. For the Great 8, we should have 8 eras. The legacy era, which is still being built, right? That's going to be what's after, in the years to come, after the record is broken, cemented, etc. Like, this is a big record, Wish. And
Yeah.
this is one of those, we never thought this would happen. Yeah. It's in that category, but he's done it now. And no one will ever be able to take that away from him. And this is going to be something we probably will not see again in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I mean, like when a record like this falls, there's usually fundamental underlying changes to the sport. I mean, you think about when home run records fell in baseball. Well, we kind of know why that happened now. It was medicinal. Other sports, it's because of changes in format, changes in season. If you thought about somebody breaking Wayne Gretzky's goals record, I mean, by this time they'd be playing 4-on-4, right? I mean, that's the kind of fundamental change you'd expected to see someone even threaten Gretzky's records because of the era Gretzky played. That Ovechkin has done this and come as close as he's come, even before breaking the record, was always an indication that there would be a debate whether he's the greatest goal scorer of all time, regardless, because of the era in which he played, the defenses he faced, the goalies he faced. Like, it's a tougher climb for Ovi now than it ever was for Gretzky in the 1980s. And that's not to belittle Gretzky's record. No one else did what he did. But for a goal scorer to do what Ovi has done since he came into the league is unprecedented. And in my estimation, more impressive than what Gretzky did, whether he breaks the record or not.
Yeah.
The legacy part of this is interesting, though, because one of the things that has come up a lot about Ovi in my conversations with people kind of like casually in National Hockey League fandom is where does he rank? Like, it is clear that Sidney Crosby is considered on the Mount Rushmore for the NHL. Like, he is a complete player. He's a winner. He's a champion. He's seen as a total package player in a way that Ovechkin isn't. But Ovechkin's going to own one of the greatest records in sports history. And he has led his team to a championship. And he has been, one of the shining megastars of this sport now for 20 years. And I do wonder, in the legacy era that will follow his breaking of the record and follow his NHL career being over, where will Ovechkin be in that ranking? Is he top 25? Is he top 15? Do we see him as a one-trick pony like a Mike Gardner or something like that? Or do we see him as more of a complete player? I am fascinated to see how history will view this accomplishment and then the player who accomplished it.
We typically put complete players in the Mount Rushmore or in the top 5, right? But because Alex Ovechkin has this record, I put him in the top 10 at minimum.
Wow. Okay.
I think that this record is significant enough. If you're the highest goal scorer in NHL history, period, and you beat the greatest player of all time to do it, to me, that alone is enough to put you at the very least in the top 10 greatest hockey players in NHL history. I think so.
My feeling on it is tainted because I respect. I'm thinking about defensemen. I'm thinking about centers. Those are different positions with different responsibilities than what Ovechkin was asked to do. I think of players like Connor McDavid, who, to me, do things that I never thought I would ever see a hockey player do. And I wonder where their legacy will end up being. And I think about Mario and Gretzky and Orr and Lidstrom and Bork and all these players that came before him. And I think about the accomplishments of players when there were only 6 teams. And how do I factor that into what is clearly my generational bias in favoring Ovechkin in the goal scoring record chase, where I think this era is much tougher than when you only had to beat out 5 teams to win a cup. Mm-hmm. The biggest struggle I have with Ovi and his place in history is, even if I make the argument that there are 10 players better than him, the entire basis of the sport is goals. And if you do the thing in the sport that is the most important thing better than anyone else has ever done it, then you probably should be one of the top 10 players of all time, shouldn't you?
Absolutely. And scoring a goal in the National Hockey League is one of the toughest things to do in sports.
Yeah.
Period. So he did it better than anybody that has ever lived. To me, that carries immense weight.
More to the point, I mean, there's probably a lot of young viewers watching this who don't know about where hockey was in 2005. It's a very dark time. It was a canceled season. It was the sport at the ebb of its popularity because of the style of hockey that was being played. The trap years and everything like that. There's 3 reasons why the NHL became what it is today, as far as the success goes. One is the revitalization of huge important franchises: Chicago, Boston, Pittsburgh. Like, these are teams that got good at the right time to pick the league up when it needed it. The second thing is the outdoor games. Don't sleep on how big the Winter Classic was, man. And that's also a Sidney Crosby joint. And the third thing, and maybe this should be the first thing, is the Crosby versus Ovechkin rivalry. Like, having that rivalry as the sun around which everything else rotated. And it felt that way. I mean, they used to put those games on Super Bowl Sunday, dude. Like, that's how big that rivalry was. Just revitalized this league at a time when it needed something like that. And I give full credit to Crosby for being who he is. But if it's not having, like you said, the rivalry and the other side of the coin that was Ovechkin, the golden boy from Canada versus the rock star from Russia, we don't get that revitalization of the NHL.
Wish well put. That brings us to winners and losers presented by Discover, and these are winners and losers for when Alex Ovechkin is the all-time goal-scoring leader, when he passes Wayne Gretzky. Winner, and this is a winner before, during, and after, is hockey, the sport in general. Many other sports have had their moments where people were talking about it. It permeated beyond the sports bubble. LeBron in the NBA, baseball and the home run chases. This is the NHL's moment to see one of its biggest stars in the history of the game shatter a record that many viewed as unbreakable in the modern era. I use the word immortality. That's what Alex Ovechkin is cementing right now. And we had a moment like this earlier in the year with 4 Nations, where people outside of the hockey bubble were talking about hockey and being excited about hockey. And that's exactly what has been and will continue to happen, is people who love sports, or even just casuals in anything, talking about hockey because of Alex Ovechkin breaking Gretzky's record.
Absolutely. Loser, cancer. Please recall that Ovechkin has partnered with Hockey Fights Cancer and the V Foundation for Cancer Research to launch the Great 8 Chase for Victory Over Cancer. It was a fundraiser for pediatric cancer research. As part of the initiative, Ovechkin donated an amount equal to his goal total and will continue to do so throughout the rest of his career. Fans, They raised their own funds on a per goal basis as Ovechkin continued the chase. That money will all go towards cancer research. And you got to love the fact that Ovechkin and the Capitals found a way to try to create a little bit of goodwill through this record chase.
Absolutely. Winner, the goalie who gets scored on. Mike Bassick. He played 51 games in the major leagues over 5 seasons as a relief pitcher, but he will forever be notable because he gave up Barry Bonds' 756th home run. A random journeyman became a forever trivia answer. While no goalie wants to be the one that gives up the goal, being a part of this kind of history is probably pretty cool, whether they're a journeyman backup or a star netminder. Congratulations, Elvis Merzlikins. You could be in trivia history.
Loser, Jaromir Jagr. Arda, do you know who holds the record for the highest number of career goals in professional and international games combined? I'll give you a hint. It's not Wayne Gretzky.
No.
It is, in fact, Jaromir Jagr. And while this might not be the time to play the what if game, what if Jaromir Jagr didn't have those work stoppages in the NHL? What if Jaromir Jagr didn't leave for the Continental Hockey League in Russia for 3 seasons? What if Jaromir Jagr didn't play his prime years during the neutral zone trap era, something Ovechkin certainly didn't have to do? You know, Jagr finished with 766 career NHL goals. I often wonder, Arda, what that total would be if those things didn't happen to him. I often wonder what the conversation about Ovechkin would be had those things not happened to Jaromir Jagr.
That's a very good point. Jaromir Jagr does have peanut butter going for him, though, so he will always have that. Speaking of foods, winner, Cheetos. Alex Ovechkin is 39 years old, and he's still boarding PJs with flaming hot Cheetos in his hand, smiling, grinning ear to ear, the epitome of a goal scorer in life. And I find this amazing. And why haven't we seen like multiple Cheetos commercials with Alex Ovechkin in them?
Exactly. The opportunities are there. I mean, whether it was the Cheetos or the hot subs or going back in the day when he was getting Mama Lucia before games, it's all there for the taking, which brings me to the other part of Alex Ovechkin's gut health that we'll talk about. Loser, sports drinks. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest goal scorer in the history of the National Hockey League downs soda on the bench during games. So due respect to all of the sports drinks that partner with players, that partner with the National Hockey League. My man is going, basically he's a human Coke freestyle machine. He's going and drinking it on the bench, and he is the best goal scorer of all time because of it.
So, some gastroenterologist is going to be super famous in like 6 months with the OV diet here. Winner, Wayne Gretzky. Why? Okay, one of his records is broken. One of his untouchable records has been broken. But just remember, he had 2,857 career points. He's 1,180 points ahead of Sidney Crosby among active players. That could still be one of the greatest statistic in hockey. So yeah, it's great to see players like Alex Ovechkin break Gretzky's records, but Gretzky has so many records that there will still be records that will never be broken. So if you're Wayne Gretzky, you're like, this is awesome. I get to travel around, I get to witness the evolution of hockey, but I know my place in history will never be touched.
The sickest part of it is, let's say Ovechkin actually owned the goal record. Like, none of Gretzky's goals counted anymore. He'd still be the all-time points leader based on only his assists, which remains one of the greatest stats in the history of sports, let alone hockey. So, yeah, Wayne Gretzky no longer the goal king. He'll have to settle for holding a record where they basically will have to rethink how we play hockey. Like, it'll take 25 years of somebody playing 3-on-3 in order to break a Gretzky points record. That's how important it is. That's how vital it is. Gretzky, sorry about the goals, buddy. Congratulations on still being the great one.
That's it for us on our OV Eras tour. Thank you so much for watching The Drop, presented by Discover.